This is the beginning of a follow-on series, but with a new title. This is now The Gateway Out of the Holocaust. I think a little background would be helpful before I share with you the means to survive what is coming. I translated and contemplated the implications of Yeshayahu 17 and 18. You would know it as the 17th and 18th chapters of Isaiah. Some 10 to 15 years ago. And all the way back then, I recognized that God was foretelling about how a series of catastrophes surrounding Syria would lead to the fall of the Syrian regime, and that it would be at the hands of terrorists, but prompted by a global player that was described in the 18th chapter. That global player is Donald Trump in the United States of America. The unrest that the terrorist would cause and the removal of the prior government, as bad as it was, its replacement is far worse, according to the prophet, would result in turning Damascus into a pile of rubble. And the aerial footage that we now have of Damascus and the surrounding towns and cities shows that 106,000 buildings have been destroyed, 26,000 of them in Damascus proper. Prophecy was fulfilled in every one of these areas. And, you have to think, too, that this is pretty remarkable because Damascus is the longest continuously occupied city in the world. And God has made some very profound statements about it. And he said that its demise would come at the hands of terrorists and that they would be aided by terrorists of Aurora, which is the outcasts or refugees in Jordan. He's speaking of those who masquerade today as Palestinians. Then, as a result of all of this carnage, the prophet predicted that Israel would be thinned at the waist. Now, this was an extraordinary thing to say back 2,700 years ago because Israel didn't exist at the time. There was the province of Yehudah, but even it was being threatened. At the time that Yeshayahu wrote, the Assyrians had hauled away 10 of the 12 tribes, and therefore the tribes of Israel were gone. And shortly thereafter, the Babylonians would wreak havoc with Judah. And so there wasn't a Israel too thin at the waist. And there wouldn't be one until 1948. And you have to think how improbable that is because after the enslavement of the Egyptians, Mitzrayim, which was a miraculous liberation by Yahweh, and then the assaults of the Amalek and the Philistines, the rise of Dod to acquire Jerusalem and the Temple Mount and to protect God's people, unifying them, only to have his son fail and to have Israel fall apart immediately thereafter, to be besieged by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Macedonians, the Imperial Romans 3 times, the Roman Catholic Church, the Ottomans, Muslims and their conquest of the world, and besieged again by the Byzantines, by the Holy Roman Empire, by the Nazis, by Muslims again, and now by Marxists aiding and abetting Muslims. What are the odds that this could occur? It would have been uncalculable, and yet here we are, and the prophecy is on the cusp of being fulfilled. A Fakistinian state is going to be awarded to the very terrorists that perpetrated October 7th. It was amongst the most savage attacks in human history, and it will be amongst the dumbest moves ever perpetrated by humankind. And the consequence, according to the prophets, is going to be 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die. And that is why I call Trump's betrayal the gateway to the Holocaust. And again, the reason that I implicate Donald Trump is because in the narrative of Yeshaya Isaiah, 18th chapter, verses 1 through 3, there are some 72 attributes that define the nation that is most responsible for making Israel vulnerable by playing Neville Chamberlain and giving Israel to its foes that fit no other nation or no other individual except Donald Trump in the United States of America. But also the timeline in which this is going to occur, according to the prophet, is prior to the fulfillment of Shabuah. Shabuah will be fulfilled on the 22nd of May, 2026, so within the next year. Therefore, there's only one candidate, Donald Trump. Now, as it pertains to the Donald, what I'm going to say about him is not born out of a political rivalry. I am the furthest from a progressive, a Marxist, a Democrat, or a liberal. I am actually too conservative to be a Republican. So I actually thought that Trump had a likelihood, based upon his first term, of being better than Cackles. Obviously, that was wrong. There is something that Trump's stupid, and that's Trump. So I want to explain to you some of the things that I have seen that indicate that it is Donald Trump that will be betraying Israel, consistent with the prophecy, which is undeniable in its application. Trump began by this whole episode by accepting in his last term billions from Saudi Arabia, including his son-in-law, who accepted $2 billion, and his former Treasury Secretary, who accepted $1 billion from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia doesn't give out that kind of money, $3 billion, not to buy influence. And then we have his first move pursuant to Israel, the appointment of Steve Witkoff. Witkoff was bribed $623 million by the Qataris, which is the International Bank of Islamic Terror. It is the country most responsible for using its wealth to buy influence in America, and the influence that it is buying with Marxist media outlets and with college institutions, and now even with conservative talk show hosts, makes it the principal instigator for the carnage we're witnessing in the United States as well as Europe against Jews. And yet this is the man that he picked to negotiate between Israel and the Islamic world. That was all really Israel should have ever needed to know. Then before he was actually sworn in for Trump 2.0, the Donald said that there's going to be hell to pay throughout the Middle East if the hostages are not all released. They were not all released. And rather than putting pressure on the Muslims, Donald Trump put all of his pressure on Netanyahu and Israel and made Israel capitulate to Hamas's terms. When Qatar, who is the financier of Hamas, applauds someone strong-arming Israel, as the Qataris did, from the emir all the way down, while also saying death to Israel, you know you're on the wrong side. And that's what occurred. At that point, it should have been obvious. But then we go from there to Trump saying that he's going to build resorts in Gaza. And then he says, I'm going to build emerald cities for Palestinians, as if there was such a thing, for them to live freely and prosperously in the Sinai and in Jordan without bothering to see how the Egyptians or the Jordanians thought about that. And when they both said, hell no, even Trump couldn't bribe them or arm wrestle them into saying yes. Trump just gave up on his emerald cities for Fakistinians or his Gaza resort, which America was going to acquire Gaza. If you're Jewish and you don't recognize the insanity of that, or the fact that even if he could have pulled it off, which of course it would have been impossible to pull off, that it would have been counterproductive, that you would have taken the murderous Muslims in Gaza and you would have released them into a place that they could have received as many arms as they wanted, and Israel would have no way of policing it or reducing the flow of arms, and where they would have rallied other Muslims around them to increase the number of jihadists for the next attack. It was suicidal. It was the sign of an insane mind, and the fact that Jews applauded it and applauded Trump for saying so is an exceedingly sad situation. But then they will say, well, Trump then opened the coffers of U.S. weapons to Israel to continue its attacks on Hamas. Now, Israel was played for a fool. It doesn't take a smart person to recognize that the strategy that Netanyahu has deployed to get retaliation against what happened on October 7th has backfired by the IDF bombing Gaza into a demolition site. The world has turned against Israel. Sure, I understand that amongst the Marxists and amongst the Muslims, anti-Semitism was already rife, but it made it a cause célèbre for much of the world to hate Jews. And it took simmering anti-Semitism and it took it to a level never experienced previously in world history, far worse than 1920s, 30s, and 40s Europe, which is why I entitled this series Gateway to the Holocaust. And so all that America did by giving Israel a green light to bomb Gaza and the weapons to do so was the assurance that the entire world would turn on Israel and that ultimately it would be impossible to forestall a Palestinian state, which is the intent from the beginning. Israel, you were played for a fool, and you played a starring role in your own demise. Then there was America started to negotiate directly with Hamas. No middleman, just directly with Hamas, aided and abetted, of course, by Qatar. Whatever happened to America wouldn't negotiate with terrorists. And all the way along, America's dealings with Hamas showed that Israel had no idea. I mean, that not only Israel had no input in the negotiations, but the Trump administration had no idea who they were dealing with. And Trump has taken the position of the Marxists within Israel, which is completely suicidal. When you prioritize, as Trump has done, the hostages over Israel's survival, you are assuring Israel's demise. Whether it was 250 in the beginning or just 20 now. To value their return over the survival of Israel is amongst the most immoral and ignorant, irrational things that have ever been perpetrated. And the fact that the majority of Israelis now support it says that, once again, Israel has become its own worst enemy, although in this case, clearly aided and abetted by Donald Trump, who has taken that same position, knowing where it leads. Israel can be manipulated and controlled by the hostages, which is why Hamas took them in the first place. This then brings us to Donald Trump accepting now, in addition to the $3.5 billion that Trump and company had accepted from Saudi Arabia prior to this present term beginning. Trump and company have accepted another $13 billion, making the total $16.5 billion in bribes. I have delineated all of these on X and on Facebook, and I have presented them in a portion of the YAHOWAH blog. Trump Criminal Enterprises is the name of that series. Trump is owned and operated now by MBS of Saudi Arabia, the Emirs of Qatar, and United Arab Emirates, and he is doing their bidding. He is the reason that America just simply withdrew from its campaign against the Houthis. They told him to. It is the reason that Trump forbade Israel from defending itself against what is essentially a predestined attack by Iran and its nuclear threat by Trump, because the Qataris and the Saudis told him not to allow Israel to bomb them or not to bomb them as America. Of course, they don't want the Islamic country of Iran bombed when it's on the precipice of having a nuclear arsenal that they want to deploy against and to control Israel. And Trump then engaged in nuclear discussions through Oman, which is like asking the village idiot to give you advice on how to build a starship to go to Mars. All the while, Trump claims that he is making progress when not only are the Iranians continuing to shout death to Israel and death to the United States, but they're also saying they're not going to give up uranium enrichment, which the United States, of course, said must be given up. And then we find out that the proposed deal allows Iran to continue to enrich uranium. The fact is that Iran already has enough enriched uranium for 30 bombs because they're now augmented by their manufacture of tritium to enhance their yield. All that Trump did is he stalled Israel defending itself long enough to allow Iran to finish their nuclear ambitions. Now, that should have been enough, wouldn't you think, to tell the world that he has betrayed Israel. Well, there are other telltale signs, and these must not be overlooked as well. It's not just that Trump now is bribed by these three Islamic despots. It's that he craves the prize of the ultimate deal of negotiating a normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Islamic world with Israel. Now, the only way to do that, of course, is to make Israel indefensible and vulnerable to the Muslims, which necessitates a Fakistinian state of terror carved out of the heart of Israel. He knows this to be the case, but he wants the prize. He doesn't care what happens to Israel. All he wants is the prize. And so this is what he has agreed to do. And we're going to watch this unfold over the next 12 months. Now, there is another motivation beyond the bribe, beyond the prize, for Trump becoming the puppet of MBS and Qatar, and for him spending his first and only trip abroad. They're not only celebrating his business relationships and bribes with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, and having gone to no other foreign country. And even while there, meeting with the head of the Islamic State as Jolani has overthrown the Assad regime, bypassing Israel, of course, in the way. But there is, as I say, another motivation, and it's important for you to know this. And it's a bit more complicated, but when Trump rebuked Zelensky in such a childish manner in the White House, listen, I'm no fan of Zelensky. I think he's a creep, and I can't stand the Ukraine because I have a long history and understand the graft of the Ukraine and its anti-Jewish practices over the centuries. But when Trump chose to embarrass him, it galvanized Europe against Trump and the United States. And then Europe decided, well, we're going to make our own weapons and we're going to declare our own war against Russia, since the current proxy war using Ukraine is America's war. It was started 17 years ago, and I've detailed all of the evidence that exists to prove that point. But when he did so, the Europeans began to conceive a workaround for the U.S. dollar as being the international reserve currency. Now, this issue was hugely exacerbated when Trump continued to pressure Russia with sanctions, because the sanctions against Russia put China and Iran together with Russia, creating a perilous situation for the world, and also motivating Russia and China to work around the US dollar reserve currency status. And as if trying to light the fire that would destroy the world, we have next the president instituting the most diabolical and suicidal, inane tariff policy beyond even comprehension, without justification in almost all cases, and without any chance of success. And once he did that, the dollar had no chance, save one, of even pretending to retain its status as reserve currency. And the only chance it had then was to have the Saudis not become part of BRICS and to maintain some semblance of the petrodollar in the purchase of Saudi and other OPEC countries' oil. Now, let me explain to you why this is so important and what it cost the United States. The United States has nearly $40 trillion in federal debt, and when you consider state debt, it's well over $40 trillion. It isn't sustainable. It isn't, the country is no longer solvent. The official term for where we are now as the United States is bankrupt. But the United States has a fiat currency, which is the currency of smoke and mirrors, the currency of actual debt. And it has a Federal Reserve that can create the illusion of money, to create the illusion of solvency based upon the fact that there are so many dollars floating around because of the U.S. reserve currency status with international trade that the United States has destroyed. So without that international reserve currency status, then the Federal Reserve can't create the illusion of money without destroying the value of the currency such that there is runaway inflation. Therefore, to create and postpone this illusion of solvency and to postpone catastrophic bankruptcy, Trump played right into MBS's and Saudi Arabia's maniacal hands and gave them the ability to demand whatever they wanted to keep the United States solvent. And what the Saudi Arabians wanted, access to nuclear technology. Now, a country that floats on oil and gas does not need atoms to boil water. So it's the exact same thing has happened in Iraq and Iran with a nuclear program. It's to make a nuclear bomb. The United States capitulated. Number two, because of the intelligence delta between the Islamic world and the rest of the world, they needed desperately artificial intelligence and the chips that power it. Trump capitulated. Number three, they wanted an agreement where the United States pledged its military, its own sons and daughters, to defend the kingdom against any foe, including Israel. The United States capitulated. And then they wanted weapons. Lots and lots of powerful weapons. And the United States capitulated. $150 billion more weapons. And of course, they want Israel to have to give up its heart for a Fakistinian state of Islamic terror, so that the next October 7th won't just be from one direction, from Gaza, but will be from inside the very heart of Israel and be unstoppable. This is what he has done. I saw it coming. I explained every nuance along the way. I did everything I could tell you to demonstrate that the President of the United States has made this decision. And he is now taken out of his administration those who were pro-Israel and who spoke on behalf of Israel. The lone token pro-Israel person is the ambassador to Israel, Huckabee. And, he's a talk show host. This is where you are, Israel. You're about to be sacrificed. Now, I realized, because the prophets had said so, that not only was this going to happen over the next year, but also the consequence to Israel, according to the prophets, makes Israel indefensible. And they talk about a flood of jihadists, of terrorists coming into Israel that are so far beyond Alaska flood that they can't be stopped. And that millions upon millions of Jews die. That's why I called it the gateway to the Holocaust. Well, that's where we are. And what we have witnessed now around the world, and Jews are finally waking up to this, is that the world has turned against them. Jews have made a whole series of mistakes. One is actually parenting the ethnic slur Palestinian in Palestine. Jews say it all the time in their media, even in political office. And by acquiescing to that ethnic slur of Hadrian, you've already played into their hands and you've lost. And yet they have. The Jews went after Hamas as opposed to Islam, when the overwhelming majority of those who invaded Israel to rape, kidnap, torture, and murder Jews were not Hamas. They were simply Muslims. And they're going after Hamas as if they can wipe them out, not realizing that Hamas is Islamic and Gaza is Islamic. And in Islamic culture, you can't wipe out Islam, particularly with bullets and bombs. You simply make more of them. But all the while, Israel is manufacturing enemies around the world at a prodigious pace. And so what we're seeing now in the Marxist Muslim alliance, something that I began to speak of years ago as the greatest threat to human existence, now they're beginning to wake up to this reality, but way too late and without enough knowledge to do any good. Now, that's the gateway to the Holocaust. There is a gateway from it. And I want to continue with Yahowah, because he tells us that gateway, and it begins fairly ominously. It will end positively, but for a very small remnant of God's people. And you need to know what God's position on all of this is, because Israel continues to speak of a G-D and of a Hashem that they do not know. And until Israel begins to recognize Yahweh by name, proclaiming his name and restoring his place in their lives, God's going to remain estranged from them. Indeed, because, key, brother, instead, truly and surely, here and now, at this point in time, this is what Meanwhile, on this occasion, making a transition and focusing on what follows, thusly Yahweh, which is the proper pronunciation of Yahweh, our Elohah, God, as directed by his Torah teaching regarding his Haya existence and our Shalom, restoration, said, Amar, declared, answered, stated, and promised to me. This is to the prophet Yeshaya, Isaiah. Yeshaya means Yahweh delivers. To me, I will choose to be silent and tranquil, undisturbed and inactive, electing to be absent from the troubling strife and war. Shakat. Oh, Israel. During the Exodus, Israel, you were so belligerent, so obnoxious, so retarded, and repulsive towards God. You not only told him to go away and shut up, you caused Moshe to say, I can't deal with you any longer. Moshe gave up. He told God that leading and teaching Jews was impossible. No one could do it. And that he would just prefer God to kill him as opposed to continuing this agony of pretending that God's people were somehow reachable. God didn't say to Moshe, pal, yeah, they have their moments, but all in all, I love them, and, we're going to stay the course. He didn't say that at all. He said, I agree with you. They're obnoxious. They're belligerent. They're embittered. They're ungrateful. They are indeed disgusting, is what God said. And I'm out of here too. We're going to go through the motions, but apart from 20 men who I will speak through over the next thousands of years, I'm not going to have any interactions with the Jews. That's what God said. I'm going to be silent and tranquil. Now, here, this statement is on the is immediately adjusted, juxtaposed to, adjacent to the thinning of Israel at the waist, the creation of a Fakistanian state, the betrayal of Israel by the United States, and Israel becoming indefensible and war becoming imminent with the world, but perpetrated mostly by Muslims. And God is saying, I'm going to stay out of it. I am going to stay out of it. I'm not going to engage. Shakat. I will choose to be silent and tranquil, undisturbed and inactive, electing to be absent from the troubling strife and war. My desire will be to be serene in a vastly more favorable circumstance, removed from the fighting and the angst, as well as the fissures in the relationship. Having resolved the most pressing threat, I will choose to distance myself from the tumult and strife, being quiet and calm. Call, imperfect, cohortative. Actually and ongoing as an expression of first-person volition. God's given up on you, Israel. You did this to yourselves. Judaism is the root cause. God despises religion, and no religion does God hate more than Judaism. Rabbis not only robbed you of God's name, They robbed you of the intent and the means to benefit from the covenant. They robbed you of the intent and means to benefit from the Moed Mikre. They robbed you of your Messiah and your Savior and your King. They stole your soul, all to make a buck from their religion. But worse than that, rabbis created Christianity and Islam, your two most formidable foes. And God said, I got nobody to rally around. There's no one for me to reach out to and benefit. There is no one that I can say I care about that person because that person cares about me. God says, I'm just going to sit it out. I'm not going to intervene, just like God didn't intervene in the Holocaust. You've done this to yourself. Then I will thoughtfully choose what to observe, electing to respond appropriately. Nabat. I will choose to look at what I desire, interpreting and considering what I choose to see, paying attention to and anticipating my genuinely desired unfolding and caring reply. In the Hiphil stem, the subject causes the object to participate in and share the action of the verb in a similar fashion. And in the imperfect conjugation, it makes the action ongoing, while the cohortative mood expresses the desire of the subject in this case. God's going to choose what he wants to engage in and how he will engage with those individuals. Doing so in my place, Makom, my well-known location in space where the universe was fashioned, formed, and established, which is the basis for and the foundation of life. My provision for life, which has been prepared, my known dwelling place from Ma to question the implications of who, what, why, where, and when, Kun, to prepare and firmly establish, to direct aright, and to be consistent with the radiant glowing Tashak, the dazzling and beautiful, the handsome and shimmering, the clearly understandable source of beaming illumination, aglow with passionate warmth. Chom, the aroused and ever growing, more zealously enthusiastic from Chamam, to exude warmth and to be passionate of the Almighty's light, or a luminous nature, enlightening brilliance, shining illumination. And it will be similar to an enveloping cloud of warm light, of encompassing mist, providing an abundance of prosperity, the warmth and enthusiasm of the harvest associated with the branch, the reaping and gathering in of the shoots off the branch of the tree during an anguishing period from Katsir, during the loathsome discouragement and vexing grief of a time which must be cut short to preserve a few lives. Yashayah, deliverances from Yahweh. Isaiah 18:4. Boy, I gave you the full amplified version of that, didn't I? Well, we're going to talk about each word and seek to elucidate as much understanding as we can from this. But let's just summarize the gist of it. Yahweh is saying, I'm staying out of this. Israel, you have made yourself indefensible based upon the actions of Donald Trump and the United States. You put yourself in this position, and they're betraying you. And as a result of this, Israel is now indefensible. And therefore, you're going to experience a far worse version of 10:7. I think it's 1,000-fold. And that it will occur within 2 years' time. within a year of the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles, which begins in May of 2026. And that God's not going to intervene for you. He is not going to shoo the Muslims away. It's going to be very much like October 7th, where not only didn't the IDF engage to defend Israel, God didn't either. That's what you got to look forward to. Now, God says, I'm going to be serene, and uninvolved in this war, but I am going to pay attention where I want to, where I think that I need to, for the things that I want to perceive and to act upon. And that as a result of this, I will be delivering my light, my illumination, my enveloping spirit. And this will effectively lead to a harvest, a katsir. And therefore, my attention right now is not on trying to save Israel from the United States or from Muslims or from Marxists. My attention is going to be to enlighten the one who is making the most of the ensuing harvest, the katsir. My priority is having a productive harvest at this time. That's a good summary of it. Now let's delve into more. Well, the fact is, this is more the norm than most people want to realize, because God just is not involved in human affairs. Unless it is necessary to assure the continued existence of Israel, which he will finally intervene, as it appears that all is lost, beginning on Towrah in 2033, God really does not care much about the rest of human existence. We are going to nuke ourselves into oblivion. We're going to choke the planet. Everything bad is going to happen, and really God doesn't care, because he has the means to restore the earth back to the conditions of the Garden of Eden. And the fact is that all of those who are bludgeoning themselves into oblivion aren't going to be part of that anyway. So if they kill themselves, it's just sparing God the trouble. YAHOWAH Shakat chooses to remain undisturbed and inactive, electing to be absent from the troubling strife of war. Well, the fact is that God's people told him to shut up and go away. And God says, all right, no problem with that. I will do that, which means that at that point on, God would speak through a select few men, some 20 of them, a couple of women as well. Well, we don't have much from the women that he spoke through. And it's probably only 15 of the 20 men that we have a significant legacy as to know specifically what they had to say about God and his people. But this is how God would communicate. And what his people did with what he conveyed through those individuals would make all the difference. And finally, it came to a point that by the time of Malachi 450 BCE, he was the last receptive Jew. From that point to today, 2,500 years later, there wasn't a single Jew who would listen to God. So there was no reason for him to engage. There was no one who would even acknowledge his name, who would acknowledge his son and what his son had accomplished, who would prioritize his testimony over religious rubbish. So God says, there's no one to talk to. There's no reason for him to engage. There was no one through whom he could engage with. So it's not that he doesn't want to intervene, but that he is precluded from doing so because there's no one through whom he can engage, particularly with Israel. Now, God always communicates with and works through those willing to listen to him. That has always been his modus operandi. And he then directs those who listen to his prophets. But within the past 2,500 years, there's been no one with whom he could engage. So while his people stand apart. His desire has been to be serene in a vastly more favorable circumstance, removed from the fighting and angst of human hostilities. While he has routinely addressed the fissures in the fractured relationship, he does not micromanage the affairs of the covenant or those who are opposed to it. You know, why would God want to look down and see Jews being gunned down outside of a museum in Washington, D.C. by a Marxist screaming, free Palestine? He knows there's no Palestine. He knows that there's nothing in Islam that's ever been free. He knows that the Marxist is out of his mind, immoral and ignorant. He knows that his people don't know their enemy and that they're making a bad situation worse and have separated themselves from him. Do you think God wants to see Mohammed Muslim firebomb a group of very liberal Jews protesting their government while advocating the release of hostages that they want released at any cost, even if it's suicidal to Israel? Where does he have a side that he can identify with there? They're both wrong. I mean, certainly the Muslim is worse than the Jews who are trying to undermine the Israeli government and the survival of the state of Israel on behalf of 20 hostages, but doesn't change the fact that that is where we are in this regard. We've just had the arrival of the Wookiee, who came in with great fanfare, barking and tail wagging. Wanted to be up here on the desk, and maybe we'll arrange that depending on how the Wookiee responds going forward. Anyway, this is the story. Oh, here we are. I told you that we had a very, very excited Wookiee. Yes. So, okay, you want to talk to the people? What do you want to tell them? Want to tell them, love Yahweh, respond to Yahweh. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate Dode. Dode is my king. You want to tell him that? Okay. I will protect you if you are responsive. You want to tell him that too? Okay. Well, he's not very talkative tonight. That's what he would say if he could talk to you. Well, just take my water, see if I need it. He doesn't really care for water very much because he has a hankering for iced tea. Sometimes we just have to live with what we have there, Wookiee. God has nothing but sadness if he would look on his people now. He would look down and he would see them all rallying around a star, the very star that was used to humiliate them, to degrade them, to dehumanize them by the Roman Catholics and then by the Nazis. He would see the star that was conjured up in rabbinical Judaism as part of Kabbalah, which is, from his point of view, demon worshiping. He would see the star of the false Messiah that stole from his people the truth about the real Messiah, David. That star belongs to the son of a star, Bar Kokhba. It would bring him great pain. He would see his people jumping up and down in religious ceremonies, segregating women, bobbing their heads against a stone wall, reciting prayers but not listening to him, dressing the Torah up like it was a whore while plastering over it with their Talmud. He would see religious parasites claiming to speak for him that he despises, and he would see Marxist progressives speaking of the demise of the state that he and his sons so love. So God doesn't want to look down on, see any of this now. But he has to engage to promote the harvest, because the next Moed Mikre is a Katsir. Shabua is the last Katsir. Towrah will be a Lakat gleaning. And then there will be the sacrifice of the red heifer prior to the great homecoming on Towrah, from Towrah to Kippurim. And so God has to engage in a limited way to enlighten the one responsible for the Katsir harvest of Shabuah to protect his covenant family from the ordeal that is ensuing with the time of Jacob's troubles. And he has to come back to reward those who have chosen to be part of the covenant during the 7 years of the Shar Jacob, the time of Israel's troubles. And he has to come back to orchestrate the great show that is part of the sacrifice of the red heifer, the Adam of Parah, on behalf of the adulterous woman, so that there's a remnant of Israel prepared for his son's triumphant return. But that's it. Shakat means that having resolved the most pressing threat, which father and son achieved through Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, opening the doorway to life, offering to perfect every covenant member by carrying their guilt away and depositing it in Sheol, and then signing the adoption papers into Bakodim as firstborn children. God's taking care of what he must, and now he has found his choder. He has found his Nakri. He has found Dod's Bashar. He has now a Zeroah to cultivate the final harvest, and he has provided ample enlightenment for him to do that job. And I have to say, as the Choder, Bashar, Nakri, and Zeroah, that, can I say this without God being disappointed at me? In this regard, it's almost as if God's crazy. I'm sorry. I mean, I love God. He's the most brilliant mind in the universe. But think it through. God, in person, beside Moshe, tried to get Yisrael's attention during the Exodus. He had just saved them from slavery and Mitzrayim. He had parted the Red Sea. He had garnered their release through Pesach and Matzah. He was illuminating them with his Torah. And in their midst, while he's feeding them and protecting them, they turned on him and said, "We don't want to hear from you anymore. We don't want to see you anymore. Go away." And they became so obnoxious that Moshe says, "I can't do this anymore. I want out." And now you pick a goy and say, "Yep, there's my guy. He's going to fix this all up. We're going to have a productive harvest. He's going to get them to embrace me again and receive me by name again, and come to accept what David did through fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, and it's all going to be good in the hood." I mean, are you crazy? I mean, you picked a man that's now 70 years old. And this is your plan? I mean, listen, I've been dedicated to this plan for 24 years. Every waking moment of my life for 24 years has been devoted to pursuing Yahweh's ambition, which is to awaken his people so that they stop being religious and political, and they come to trust and rely on him and the provision that he has offered through his beloved son, Dod, instead, and that they come home. That has been every waking hour for 24 years. It is my life. And I have 35 books that we've collaborated on together under the Yada Yahowah brand. I have written 5 books to protect Israel from the onslaught of Islam called Goddamn Religion, Gift to Israel. I've written 5 volumes called Twistianity to remove the religious rubbish of the Christian New Testament so that Jews would be prepared to see the actual Messiah and Son of God who fulfilled Pesach by being crucified in 33 CE, and it's Dod, the king, David. I have repudiated rabbinic Judaism through the Babel series, of which there's 3 volumes, because it's rabbis that created Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all to separate Jews from Yahweh. I'm trying to resolve this terrible atrocity and abomination that has been done. And I'm committed to it. And we've seen tremendous progress in this collaborative effort. And I realize that Yahweh is providing for me more than he's ever given to anyone to get this done, which is the seven spirits of Yahweh. And he's all in. And that he has issued hundreds of prophecies to affirm the work we're doing together. And according to Yahweh, we prevail in the end. But are you kidding me? I mean, I'm the object of this. I'm devoted to this. And it's even hard for me to understand how we're going to prevail. After 3,500 years of na, sticking out their tongue, pointing their finger at God, spitting in his face. It's a tough audience. Well, God obviously thinks that collaboratively we're up to the challenge and that he has a team that he has surrounded me with that is capable of disseminating this information and that we're going to prevail. He says so. He's never been wrong on a prophecy, and he's indicated that we prevail. But oh my, when he says that he's going to be tranquil up there in the heavens, and this is what he's going to do in a very narrow and focused way to facilitate these harvests, it's putting the future of the planet in an unqualified man's hands. Now, that's a little bit unfair, not in the assessment of what he's working with in me, but because of the fact that he has enabled me with his testimony and with the seven spirits of Yahweh, and has afforded a literal army of Malak to keep me safe and healthy and able. But wow, still tough to process. Even Wookie says, I'm out of here. You're asking too much of a dog. He's over there now with Rich being co-producer. So Yahweh is revealing that at this point in time, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it is important for us to stand his nature in the fact that he has no interest and no desire and no need to witness the horrible things that are going around. It's why when the religious pray, I said, why would you think that God's going to listen to you mock him? I mean, you've got 2.5 billion people that think that God was no bigger than a man and that Jews killed their man God. And they came up with this crazy name of Jesus Christ. And he's only a blend of what was robbed from dote combined with a heavy dose of Dionysus. And you think God's going to care about those people that are so stupid as to believe a New Testament whose principal author and first 14 books were written by a man who claimed to be inspired by the God he contradicted at every possible opportunity? And then you have 2 billion people in the next largest religion that believe Satan is God and that God rewards those who kill Jews. Those who give God credit for home runs and touchdowns, acing tests, and winning the lottery would be dead wrong, as would be those who blame God for their failures and struggles, as the Pope just did, for accidents and for disease. Second, there is the propensity for people in desperate situations to cry out for God for help when he does not answer, as will be the case on this day. Those who are suffering either turn to fabricated beliefs or discount his existence, both of which are counterproductive. Third, forewarned is forearmed. If you want God's help, reach out to him at a time of his choosing. Know what he is offering and seeking in return. Do not turn to him out of desperation. It is neither respectful nor is it fair. This realization is especially important once I thought that the tribulation would get so horrid that Jews, out of a complete desperation and with no other option, would finally reject their rabbis and they're even the IDF and trust God instead. But that's only partially true. Yes, they're going to be put in a position where they're going to recognize their rabbis have lied to them and they're untrustworthy. They're going to recognize the religion of Judaism is useless. They're going to recognize that the IDF cannot protect them. They're going to realize that all of their politicians turned out to be liars. They're going to realize all of that. They have no other option. And there will be a number of them who will have listened to the YAHOWAH blog, who will have read the books at yadayah.com, who will respond, and they are going to find YAHOWAH waiting for them with open arms. Now, with Judaism's antiquated and burdensome religion, bleeding credibility, and holding unproductive Jews in spiritual custody as parasites, a younger generation is going to gradually forego their absurd traditions and choose freedom. And that is beginning to happen. Then, with the Israeli government becoming incapacitated and embroiled in ever more inexplicable parliamentary infighting and scandals, a great many Yehudim will begin to search for a rational alternative. Their quest for credible answers will bring them to the Nesh, the sign which YAHOWAH has endorsed at this time that he is raising for all to read. That sign is called Yada Yahowah. And he is raising it for this reason on their behalf at this time. Based upon what they read, what they hear, what they learn, many will accept and act upon what YAHOWAH is offering to them and asking from them in return. The Nesh is the solution to the problem of desperation. Yada Yahowah, free at yadayah.com. Free here on the YAHOWAH blog. That's my purpose, is to be the sum total of these books and all of I have learned, to be the first person that's put the entire picture together from beginning to end, while also dispelling all of the religious myths that have hidden the picture God has presented. An extraordinary thing that God has done with his co-worker. Now, the last thing Yah wants is to have millions of religious and politically inclined individuals choose him only because he's offering a safe harbor in the midst of impending doom in this storm. An eternity with such souls would be hell. Out of harm's way, such individuals would revert to their old ways. This would be akin to YAHOWAH freeing the children of Israel from the brutal religious and political oppression they were enduring under the pharaohs, only to have those he saved show their appreciation by constructing and worshiping a golden calf. They did that, didn't they? The path home will be as it has been. YAHOWAH's words illuminate the way. We find them by opening our eyes and becoming observant. We come to know him by opening our minds and becoming thoughtful. Reject religion and politics, walking away from man's way in full recognition of its counterproductive and disingenuous nature. Move towards YAHOWAH, embracing him through his Torah, by answering his mikra, these invitations to meet with God. Celebrate by being perfected in the process. Come to know YAHOWAH sufficiently to trust and rely upon what he is providing as our Heavenly Father, with the passion and devotion of a young lover. Closely examine and carefully consider the instructive conditions of the Bereth covenant family and act upon them with passion. The Nesh was written for this purpose. This is why there are 3 volumes of Yada Yahowah that are devoted entirely to the covenant. 3 volumes that are devoted entirely to the Moed Mikre. I mean, 6 volumes to the Bereth, to the Mikre. 5 volumes to those trying to kill you, protect you from them. 5 from those robbing you of your Messiah, of the very Son of God, of your King, so that you might embrace him. 3 devoted to outing the rabbis, so that you would stop trusting them. The Nesh was written as Yada Yahowah for this purpose. So if you are circumcised, you will begin to appreciate why Yahweh wants us to be separated from the world and unto him. If not, and if you are a man, well, it's time to have a little snip. Now, it matters not if you are Yehud or Goy, because circumcision is the sign of the covenant. Without its signature, you will be expressly excluded from Shamaim heaven. It matters not if you are fluent in Hebrew or English, or if you know that what Yahweh revealed and act upon it now, not later. I mean, heaven's door is open for those who know their way in, and not for those stumbling in the darkness, groping their way through the storm, desperately seeking salvation. God isn't here to save anyone. He is offering perfection, but it's on his terms. This is not to say that God is oblivious to his people's suffering at this moment or any other. It just means that with Nabat, he will thoughtfully choose what he wishes to observe. This will determine how he wants to respond. It is Yahweh's prerogative to Nabat to look at what he desires, consider what he chooses to see, pay attention, and anticipate an appropriate reply. If God didn't do these things, he'd be insane. Human behavior would drive him insane. So he chooses not to be driven mad by us. And therefore, he must ignore the overwhelming preponderance of us. Now, if we want Yahweh to consider us, then we must first consider him. If we want him to listen to us, then we must initiate the conversation by listening to him. If you want God to see you as worthy, open your minds and feast upon his Torah, coming to value his teaching and guidance. And know this, Yahweh will always support his Bereth family. He will always attend his Moed meetings. His Mikre invitations are always open. It's simply a matter of shub. Shub to Yahweh, return, and Yahweh will shub to you. Shub for shub, or no shub for you. Yahweh's vantage point is telling in that he uses Makom, which is a well-known place located within space-time where the universe was fashioned, formed, and established, and from which the basis for and foundation of life was conceived. While this is obviously the spiritual realm known to us as Shamaim, heaven, God's verbal depiction is considerably more insightful. The Creator is revealing that while his creation is making life miserable for themselves, he is where it all began. So wonderfully, so long ago, and with so much promise and joy, which was 6 days ago from his perspective, being able to view time as a photon of light. And yet, 16 billion years, 15 billion years from our perspective with the clock here on Earth. It was from this perspective in his Makom, his place. It was, as was the case with the Garden of Eden, the Makom is his provision for life, which he has prepared. It is not only Yahweh's known dwelling place, it is that of his children, of all who will question the who, what, where, why, when, of Kun, that which directs us, so that we might continue to endure, prepared and be established. There in his place, Yahweh is Shak Kom Or, radiant and glowing, warmly passionate, dazzling and beautiful, aglow and brilliant light. His luminous nature is clearly available for us to understand because of his willingness to bequeath his enlightenment and guidance to us. And that means that God is not a physical being. He's not a man. He is comprised of spiritual energy. That is essential because when you have two religions, the two most popular religions on earth, so blankety blank stupid that they think that you go from a physical life here, limited as physical bodies make us, to a heavenly existence with a physical body because of a bodily resurrection. You just are not thinking it through. Energy is vastly more empowered and capable than is matter. Matter and energy are comprised of the same thing. They're just enormously different amounts of the same thing. And you want to go from a physical being to a energy-based being if you want to be liberated in space and time and to travel through the dimensions to Shamayim. And that is what God is offering, because he is offering to make us more like him. And it is our souls that can make these transitions. But there's more to Yah than shimmering light. He is also Ka'ab Tal, similar to an enveloping cloud of suspended moisture. He is offering a protective canopy of encompassing mist, which provides an abundance of prosperity. Life, as it would transpire, requires two things: light and water. And we know from where and from whom both were provided and given. This is God saying that he is both the light and the water of life. The fourth reason that Yahweh wanted us to appreciate his desire to return to his place after resolving the imminent threat to Israel is that he wants us to know that he is enjoying his reunion with his family. You see, the Shabuah harvest occurs in a year's time, at the commencement of the time of Israel's troubles. And therefore, during this 7 years of hell on earth for Israel, which God says, the last thing I want to see is, look, the stuff that takes place after Israel's thinned at the waist by the United States and the Fakistinian state is established and Israel becomes indefensible and millions of Muslims rape, plunder, abduct, and murder Jews, is that God actually has something else going on at that time. And that is that the Shabuah harvest of standing grain occurs on the 22nd of May, 2026, before all of this turmoil erupts. And so this is family time. For all of the souls harvested at this time in that Katsir, it's going to be time with Yahweh in heaven. Yahweh is going to be celebrating our arrival. We will have his undivided attention as he expresses his Chom Katsir, genuine warmth and heartfelt enthusiasm over this, the greatest of harvests. This is how the Torah and prophets present Yahweh, our Heavenly Father. He is a warm, approachable, embracing, and glowing light. He cannot wait to envelop his children in his love. He wants to be as close to them as the dew is to the standing grain. Now, I don't know how I could have missed such a thing, but there is no way there is much more to Katsir, harvest. And this series that we're doing upstairs in the library studio is Katsir harvest. And it is all about the two of them, which is Shabuah followed by Towrah, the bookends of the time of Jacob's troubles. And so we know a lot about this particular word, but there's also an element to Katsir that I don't speak of very often, but in this context is meaningful. A Katsir is a twig, a shoot, or a stem off the main branch of the tree. That is also a definition of choter. The person that Yahowah chose to write this Nesh sign, that he is imbued with his 7 spirits. The choter is a twig, a shoot, or a stem off the main branch of the tree. It's revealing that those gleaned on this occasion have grown out of what the choter will have derived regarding Dode, who is the Shemak, the most beloved branch. What he has written, what he has accomplished. This is vitally important, especially in the here and now, because Israel isn't being called to accept a hostile or unknown Messiah, but instead to embrace the one who sings to them from the nation's heart, from the heart of the Torah and prophets, out of the Mizmor. Also relevant, Katsir exposes the de minimis nature of this harvest, revealing that the reaping and gathering will consist of relatively few shoots. Further, although Katsir, and through Katsir, we discover that this will occur during an anguishing period of loathsome discouragement and vexing grief at a time which must be cut short to preserve a few lives. And, while the time of Jacob's troubles is officially 7 years, it really began with a full decade. It's 10:723 to 10:733 is the entire canvas at that time. This is a terrible time of anguishing grief. But of course, it's going to get so much worse after May 22nd. Such is the nature of Paleo-Hebrew, a language whose words convey astonishing insights for those who invest the time to observe them. There is a 5th reason that we have been told by the Almighty himself that after saving Yisrael from destruction by annihilating and then purging his land of a tidal wave of perhaps tens of millions of invading Muslim militants, that he has not just returned to his place, but that he will be inactive for a time. He wants us to realize that the tormenting and terrible abuses endured during the time of Jacob's troubles will be perpetrated by man and not God. It is Muslims and the Marxists who are supporting them that will cause such grievous heartache, worse than the Holocaust, not God. It is Israel's belligerence towards God which will cause God to stand back and allow it to happen, and only stop it when it must be curtailed. But these events were brought on by man. Now, this prophetic statement serves to affirm a thinly embraced conclusion. The fact remains that Yahowah rarely intervenes in human affairs. He only acts to enable and fulfill his promises. God does not heal the sick. He does not raise the dead. He does not choose who gets the pretty girl on the date. He does not determine who wins the lottery. God is involved in the big picture. And right now, the big picture is to have a productive Shabuah harvest. And then the focus is going to be on the Teruah gleaning. And then the focus is going to be on the sacrifice of the Adam Parah and the preparation of the final remnant of Yisrael. And then the focus is going to be on his return with his beloved son, King Dode. And then the focus is going to be on restoring the earth to the conditions experienced in Eden and taking this remnant into the garden where we can enjoy 1,000 years together celebrating. And the focus is then going to be on educating that remnant such that they come to grow in their appreciation and relationship with Yahowah. And after that, there will be other things to attend to, including us serving as witnesses when Yahowah creates an additional entire universe for us to enjoy and explore. Yahowah made an eternal pledge to Abraham to love his children, whereby the benefits of the covenant would be everlasting. Should he fail to intervene to thwart mankind's assault against his family, his pledge would be negated. And while I sometimes question his choice, God has chosen to instigate the receptiveness of his people and their return to him through this Choder, through the Nakri, through the final Zeroah, through Dod's herald, albeit with his 7 spirits. Now, bringing all of these thoughts together, we find Yahowah conveying these words to Yeshaya Isaiah for our edification and benefit. It begins with God issuing a warning to his people, especially the 7 million in political Babylon. I'm going to go through the first 4 statements of Yeshaya as our conclusion to this program. Now, remember, this follows the fall of the Assyrian government, which we have witnessed, the destruction of buildings in and around Damascus, which we have witnessed, an uprising of terrorists, which we have witnessed, those terrorists leaguing with the exiles and those who view themselves as owning Israel, who are in Jordan, with the world being poised to give Israel's heart to these very Muslims who have terrorized the nation. And that it is following all of this and the realization that all of this is occurring in advance of the Shabuah harvest, 22 May of 2026, that we then read, woe, expressing dissatisfaction and a warning of impending doom to the land of whirling and hovering wings, of loud percussive flying weapons with vibrating and noisy metal components swirling around, which devour and destroy, and with the rhythmic clamor of armaments which fly in and attack, coming from well beyond where the land ends, from a distant place at the far ends of the earth, often stealthy, which, relationally speaking, is from the region situated across and on the opposite side of the world. This is an arrogant and haughty place, prone to furious outbursts, born out of an improper attitude and bias, meddling as a busybody, with a propensity to involve itself in the affairs of others. It is located in the direction of the rivers of Cush, and thus an association with Babylon. Yeshaya Isaiah 18:1. It dispatches weapons of war, sending out battle groups with an arsenal of missiles for the purpose of extending its influence by way of the sea and in the manner of Gentile nations, along with envoys, including authorized representatives of these false gods. It is prone to deliver an anguishing religious message under the guise of protection, which causes great distress because world events will pivot in a detrimental and painful manner based upon the provisions which the delegation will insist upon and impose. This will start the birth pangs. And so, in swift floating vessels quickly swallowing up great distances, among warships equipped to rapidly accomplish their undertaking, which is to control others, even if collateral damage is a consequence, within the ships where absolute authority is imposed, such that those inside are essentially captives. imprisoned to fulfill the mission over the surface of the waters because of the presence of the flood waters. The messengers who are empowered to protect, or project, I should say, influence and impose their authority, travel swiftly. They're indulgent, and they often inappropriately trivialize the complexity of the situation, while disregarding the consequences, unfairly indifferent to those whose situation they are quick to slight, impulsive and imprudent, cursing the lives of those who are intending to meddle and to demonstrate a propensity to hurriedly underestimate the intricacies of existing relationships and thereby rapidly make bad situations much worse as they move from one place to another in a short period of time without sufficient regard for their victims or the end result of these missions. This on behalf of a nation of people from different races, a melting pot of different places, who are wont to consistently take the lead, directing others while extending their reach and influence, who are actively involved out in front, enticing and directing others at considerable cost, who have a propensity to engage in the world as if it were their own, habitually seizing whatever they desire. This nation seeks to control coinage and thus the means to commerce and trade, acquiring and holding vast sums of money, continually removing people from their land while acquiring great wealth in the process. They are prone to believe in an altered state of reality while overextending and enriching themselves. They are also typically tall, immodest, and frequently intoxicated. These people are well scrubbed, smooth-skinned, and shaven, and yet reckless with weapons sharpened and gleaming, overly concerned about their personal hygiene. Their bodies are so hairless they appear to be polished. Most are beardless, and many have shaved heads as they rush headlong and headstrong, participating in perverse actions. They are a fierce and vehement people who are fond of their military's burnished weapons. These people are frightening and feared, even dreadful, while at the same time respected for their awesome power, causing great distress through intimidation and via shock and awe. But they are also venerated and revered by some for their achievements, capabilities, and status, especially the awesome sight of their missiles shooting through the air from here to there and beyond in a future time. This population, which is comprised of many different races, routinely spews out nonsense in a foreign language, talking down to others while continually marching off to war based upon their condescending and moronic rhetoric. They act like a great power, all of which deserves to be mocked and ridiculed. They routinely parrot the same meaningless phrases, vomiting up their blathering blah, 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 and thus they must be disparaged and derided. They're always trying to expand and impose their nation's influence, even its faith, establishing the rules while senselessly drawing lines in the sand. And yet they imprudently throw others out of their land, aggressively conquering and subduing, trampling people down by kicking them out. It is antagonistic and destructive, treading others underfoot while imposing its will, often partnering with enemies. It will subjugate those it can control, causing their downfall. It is polluted and rejected, blind and loathsome, even as educating the world while stripping it bare. It is desecrated as a place of blind and oblivious children imposing their will, ruining lives while destroying countries. To reveal the way and provide a reference which leads to where to find the country, it is divided by many rivers, such that it is also indicative of a large population who travel extensively. Yashaya, Isaiah 18:2. All of you who inhabit the perverted earth, this inhabitable parts of the confused world, which is in the process of destroying itself in the clamor of the Lord, and also those who remain and dwell in the land. When the sign and banner, this nesh, this means to effectively gain the people's attention, communicates the message for all to see, then rally to the point of action. Draw close and engage in a productive and responsible manner based upon that which is important and conspicuously communicated within the community. When that which can be seen, tested, and proven true is lifted up, when it's raised and respected, even found acceptable in the highest elevations, its purpose will be for you to all perceive the insights that it perceives and that it provides, all of which lead to understanding. This Nesh sign is for you to observe and to consider the witness which has been provided. It will offer perspective for those who are paying attention because they will finally come to understand. Simultaneously, a shofar comprised of a ram's horn will be used to issue a warning about opposing Yah while conveying the benefits God is offering on Yom Teruah and also on Shabuah. Its sound will encourage listeners to join together to make a pledge and then depart as they pay especially close attention to the invitations and to the summons. Yashayah Isaiah 18:3. Which brings us to, indeed, this is because here and now, at this point in time, making this transition and focusing upon what follows, this is what Yahweh said to me. I will choose to be silent and tranquil, undisturbed and inactive, electing to be absent from the troubling strife and war. It is my desire to be serene in a vastly more favorable circumstance, removed from the fighting and disassociating from the fissures and the fractures in this relationship, now that I have resolved the most pressing threat. Then I will thoughtfully choose what I want to observe. I will respond appropriately, but as I see fit. I will anticipate my genuinely desired unfolding and caring reply in my place from my well-known location in space-time. I will wait at this place where the universe was fashioned and established, in the location where the foundation of life was laid. This is where my provision for life was conceived and prepared for those who question the who, what, why, where, and when of how one becomes firmly established by making a correct decision so that they might endure. I will exist in the manner of radiant and glowing light, a dazzling and beautiful display, clearly understandable as a source of beaming illumination, which is all aglow, all with the passion and the warmth of the Almighty. Similarly, I will be manifest as an enveloping cloud of visible moisture suspended in the air. This will comprise a protective canopy and a covering encompassing as a mist, and it will provide an abundance of prosperity in the warmth and the enthusiasm of the harvest. This will all be derived from the branch. This reaping and gathering in of the few shoots off the main branch during an anguishing period from the loathsome discouragement and vexing grief of a time which must be cut short so as to preserve these few lives. Yeshayah, Isaiah 18:4. This is the gateway out of the Holocaust. God is ready and he is willing. Are you?